Welcome to section 1.7, adding and subtracting fractions. Remember, to add or subtract fractions, you must get a common denominator. And so let's look at example 1, where we have 3 over 7 minus 1 over 7. So there we have a common denominator. And so we don't have to do anything to the denominator. We'll just focus on the numerator, and we'll just subtract the numerator. So 3 minus 1 will give us 2, and the denominator stays the same. So the answer to example 1 is 2 over 7. Here in example 2, we also have a common denominator of 2a. So nothing needs to be done to the denominator. We'll just focus on the numerator, subtracting those two numbers. 3 minus 9 will give us a negative 6 over 2a, because again, the denominator does not change. And here we can simplify more. We can reduce this down to a negative 3 over a. So we can leave our answer either as negative 3 in the numerator over a, or we could put the negative in front, a negative 3 over a. So either answer is acceptable. And in Hawks, you cannot write the negative in the denominator, so make sure you pay attention to that. The negatives are not accepted in the denominator in Hawks. So let's continue on, look at another example. Here in example 3, as you can see, the denominators are different. We have a 24 and a 36. So we're going to be looking for a common denominator, 24 and 36. And let's focus on finding the least common denominator. This way we don't have to deal with huge numbers. So remember earlier we learned to find the least common multiple. So using that method, we can determine the least common denominator. So the prime factorization of 24, I'll remind you, is 2 to the third times 3, and the prime factorization of 36 is 2 squared times 3 squared. Therefore, we can determine that the least common multiple between those two numbers, 24 and 36, is going to be 2 to the third times 3 squared, which is equal to 72. So that's our least common multiple. And so we have to multiply the denominators that we have in the problem here in example 3 by the missing factors for each one, right? So here in the first term, the 5 over 24, the denominator 24 is missing the factor of 3. 24 times 3 will give me 72. So I'm going to multiply both my numerator and my denominator by 3. And in doing so, keep in mind, we're not changing the problem. Multiplying by 3 over 3 is the same as multiplying it by 1. Just this is the form of 1 we want to use. So I'm going to use a different color to denote that I'm multiplying by that number, 3 over 3. Okay? And then plus the second term, 7 over 36. 36 is missing the factor of 2. 2 times 36 will give us 72. So we're going to multiply both the numerator and denominator for this second fraction by 2. 2 over 2 is 1. So multiplying by 1 does not change the problem. Okay, in doing this, then we'll have for our first fraction, we're going to have a common denominator of 72. So we could write it all over 72, but I'm going to write it as two separate fractions here in this one. 5 times 3, or 3 times 5, is 15 over 72. And then plus 7 times 2 is 14 over 72. So here again we have a common denominator, we don't have to do anything as far as the denominator is concerned. We can write it all over one denominator, 72, and then just add the numerators. 15 plus 14 is 29. And that's it. We can't reduce that. 29 is a prime number, so there's nothing else we can do to that. So our final answer for example 3 is 29 over 72. And then we look at example 4 in a similar way, where we want to try to determine the common denominator rather than us multiplying 28 times 16, because we can get a denominator. It's just going to be a huge number if we choose to just multiply. So let's focus on finding the least common denominators or denominator. So for 28, the prime factorization will be 2 to the second times 7. And for 16, the prime factorization will be 2 to the 4th. Therefore, our least common multiple for 28 and 16 will be 2 to the 4th times 7. And 2 to the 4th times 7 is going to give us 112. So 112 is our least common denominator. And we'll multiply by the missing factors here for each one. So in the first fraction, 28 is missing the factor of 4 for it to be 112. 28 times 4 will give us 112. And for 16, we're missing the factor of 7. So I'm going to use a different color. I'm going to multiply the first term, 11 over 28, both the numerator and denominator. We're going to multiply by 4. So multiplying the first term by 4 over 4, and then minus 5 over 16. Again, I'm using a different color. That's going to be multiplied by 7 over 7. So when we multiply this, 4 times 11 is 44. And 4 times 28 is 72. And that's going to be minus, then in here, the second term, 5 times 7 is 35 over 6 times 7, that gives us 72. We have that common denominator, and we just need to focus on the numerator. 44 minus 35 will be 9 over 72. And here we can reduce this. 9 over 72 reduces to 1 over 8, because 72 or 9 goes into 72 8 times, right? So 1 over 8. So this reduces to 1/8. Final answer for example 4 is 1 over 8, or 1/8. And then lastly, we have example 5, where we want to determine our common denominator, and then we can add or subtract or subtract. Here, note that each denominator already has a b to the power of 1, so b is a common denominator, one of the common factors for that denominator. And then we've got to determine the common denominator between the number 6, 10, and 15. So again, we will write this in prime factorization, and it will help us to see this. So 6, the prime factorization of 6 will be 2 times 3. For 10, we have 2 times 5, And for 15, we have 3 times 5. So we could determine that our least common multiple, which is saying our least common denominator, will be 2 times 3 times 5, which is 30. And so therefore, our least common denominator for example 5 is going to be the 30b. 30b. So we don't have to do anything with the variable part because each part already has a b in it. So what's the missing factor for each term? For the first term, 7/6. The missing factor for the denominator is 5. The missing factor is 3 in the second term. In the last term, the missing factor is 2. So each factor, each term is going to be multiplied both numerator and denominator by its missing factor. So that first one, we're going to say multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 5, because again, multiplying by 1 in some form does not change the problem. So that's going to be 5/5 times 7/6b. Then minus, let's multiply the 3/3 times the 9/10b. And then this is going to be plus multiplying that last term, numerator and denominator, by 3. So 3 but 2. So 2/2 times 4/15b. So each denominator will be 30/b. So that first term we have 35/30b. Each denominator will be 30b. And then minus 27/30b. And then plus 8/30b. So denominator is the same, therefore we can simply add and or subtract the numerators. So we have 35 minus 27 plus 8. 35 minus 27 plus 8. So when combining those numbers, what do we get? In the numerator, we'll have 16. And our denominator is 30b. And we can reduce this, right? So both the numerator and denominator have a factor of 2. So we can reduce both by 2. In the numerator, we'll have 8. 16 divided by 2 is 8. And 30 divided by 2 is 15. So this would reduce to 8/15b. There's nothing more we can do there. So that's our final answer. And example 5, the final answer is 8/15b. This concludes section 1.7.